divorce. Last time was close to 6 months ago, and it was me standing where you are now. So believe me when I say, I know you're scared. It's okay though, you're safe here. Your home has everything you need. There's food in the fridge, clothes in the wardrobe, and information everywhere about who you are and what you've done. When you're ready, go to the kitchen. There's a cardboard box with all our paperwork and documents. The brown envelope in there contains a letter like the one you're reading now. It's the one I read when I woke up, written back when we first moved to this apartment. There's also a manila folder where you'll find the report from our doctor, Dr. Varma. It's pretty dense, with all the talk of arterioles, limbic systems, episodic memory. The short version is we had our first episode about 2 years ago. Apart from a few fragments from our early childhood, we lost all our memories. Everyone thought it was a one-off thing, a stroke. Then, 179 days later, the forgetting struck again. And then it happened again, another 179 days later. Periodic, Dr. Varma called it. A type of migraine recurring with, so far at least, unusually precise frequency. Now, I know what you're thinking, because it was what I was thinking. Aren't migraines all terrible pain and devastating headaches? But the pain is just a symptom. The migraine itself happens when blood vessels inside the brain spasm and cut off the blood flow. If they take out the blood running to your visual centres, you get weird flashes and lights. If they take out your motor senses, half your body can feel paralysed. But you, got something much less common. There's a couple of little blood vessels, or maybe just a single solitary one right in the middle of your head, running to your memory centres. And every so often, periodically, it trembles, clenches, the tiniest thing, and everything falls. The doctor said we shouldn't be that surprised. Memory's far more fragile than people think. The bad news is there's no cure. The good news is that these things come and go. I made it 29 years without an episode. For all we know, the forgetting may never strike again, or it may carry on for the next 10 years. Since you're reading this, I guess things haven't improved yet. If the timing is the same as previous episodes, then the forgetting will have struck exactly 157 days after I wrote this, making it Sunday, 25th September. You're about to have a very bad few days. Without memory, everything can seem meaningless. You'll be filled with despair. I was. But we're actually lucky. Most people with recurring amnesia don't have this long between episodes. Sometimes they have a few hours or a few minutes. We have almost 6 months between each forgetting. Enough time to come up with plans, work on them, see them through, just like a normal person. You'll see what I've done when you look through the apartment. When I first woke up and read the letter, I felt like I had no history at all. You'll see you've done something special, a project planned by my past, achieved by my present, and passed on to you, my future. That's why I can talk about us, because we're one and the same person. Through the work we go on, we endure, no matter what the forgetting does to us. The letter that set me the task said I was doing something no one else had done, like a kind of record, I suppose. But to be honest, I don't really care about records, but I hope you'll be able to see the beauty in what I've done and know that it came from your hands, our hands. Okay, some practicalities. Make sure you spend these first few days at home, preferably a week or more. Get your bearings, go through the records. There's a mementos box as well, full of treasures from our distant past. Don't go outside until you're ready. A year ago, after the third forgetting, the police found us out on the street, lost and wandering. Any repeat of that, and Dr. Varma says the government will have to put us in a home because it has a duty of care. And if that happened, we might never get out. So stay safe at home. Take as much time as you need. The grocery delivery comes every Tuesday. It's all organised and it's paid for out of our pension, along with the rent and utilities. Just smile and nod, sign the receipt they give you. You'll be fine. Whatever you do, never let anyone know your condition. Keep to yourself to keep yourself. That's what the letter said, and you'll see it was right. Memories are like armour. Without them, you have no control, nothing to hold your shape. You'll become what anyone tells you to be. That's why you have to be on your guard from the very first moments. Our life may be solitary, but at least it's our life and not someone else's. It's all anyone gets. Keeping it, that's the real fight. Robert Penfold, 21st April.
Well, that would have piqued your interest, I think, in that book. Sorry, this was our legal requirement to clean these mics in between, so bear with me. That was fantastic. So the Beautiful Fall is available at the counter as well. So please hang around and have a chat. And if you're online, this is your chance to learn where you can ask questions at the end of the event, because there will be a chat message that will have a link to our website where you can purchase the books from tonight. Also, Cass Moriarty, who's I'm about to hand over to, has her books at the counter as well. You can peruse those after the event too. So Cass Moriarty is now going to take over. Both of Cass's novels are available from Avid, including Parting Words and The Promised Seed, which was listed for awards including the 2017 Dublin Literary Impact Award and the Queensland Literary Awards. Her short fiction and creative non-fiction have been published in the Saturday paper. She's a writing mentor, book critic and reviewer, and one of her favourite activities is to host conversations with other authors so that she can learn all about their writing secrets. So hopefully we get to join her today and find out some writing secret good gold, I think. So everybody welcome Cass Moriarty. I will turn you guys so you can see her in just one moment.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I was going to start by saying something glib about, oh, isn't it great to be back in store in person? But, you know, the timing's all wrong for that, so I'll just skip that bit. But it is good to see some audience people here in person. Thank you, Hugh, for your wonderful reading. I've read Hugh's book. It's fantastic, so I urge you to get a copy of that. And hello and welcome to all the people who are joining us online. Very sensible of you. They're probably all at home in their pajamas with a glass of wine, which, you know, isn't too bad. But whether you're online or in person, thank you so much for continuing to support Australian authors, booksellers, publishers, bookshops, by buying books, borrowing books, recommending them, sharing the love. You know, we really appreciate it. And if you want to take any photos tonight and share on Twitter, Graeme and Anne, especially Graeme's not on Twitter very much, but the tag here is avid reader 4101. I knew that. Okay. So tonight, I and all of Avid are thrilled to welcome not one but two very talented authors, a couple who share not only their lives but also their love of writing. Anne Buist is the Professor of Women's Mental Health at the University of Melbourne and the author of 4 psychological thrillers. Graeme Simsion is the internationally best-selling author of 4 novels, including the Rosie Project trilogy. Together, they wrote Two Steps Forward in 2017, and their new novel, displayed here, Two Steps Onward, is another warm, witty, wise, and light-hearted exploration of love, hope, friendship, and travel. Please welcome Anne and Graeme. Now, first of all, it's really great to welcome some Melbournians. Queenslanders have been feeling very sorry for all the poor people in Melbourne lately, although now things have completely reversed.
They can laugh at us.
You can laugh at us and feel sorry for us. I think I heard that you actually haven't been home to Melbourne for a while because you were wanting to do this event and other events, and so you avoided going home so you didn't have to face lockdown and quarantine. And so we're very privileged to have you here.
Well, so we didn't have the mark. No, we haven't been back in Melbourne for 3 months now. But we will be back tomorrow, and of course, unexpectedly, we're going to have the stamp of Queensland on us, and it's going to be up your nose with a rubber hose, and isolation, and all those sorts of things. But look, before we start, first of all, thank you so much, Cass. This is not the first time that I've at least spoken to Cass at this very venue, and not the first time that we both have spoken at audiences here at Avid. These have been, it's always tough times for bricks and mortar bookshops, and these again with lockdowns potentially and so forth. These are tough times right across the nation. Thank you, Avid. Thank you for your support and coming on and supporting Avid, because these things, we without these bookstores, we wouldn't have these events like this. So a great thing. Can I also
So I had no idea that Hugh had been, I'm sorry that you were forgettable, Hugh, but I had no idea that Hugh had been on one of my courses. But I did read and wrote what I hope are some nice things to put on the cover of The Beautiful Fall. You heard the opening, and it may or may not have grabbed you, but there was a line in there which was, "This is all any of us have," or words to that effect. And I think that sort of presages just how deep the book actually goes. And I would say to you, if it didn't grab you yourself, think of the smartest person you know and buy them a copy of this and give it to them for their birthday or Christmas. Okay, just do it, and they'll love it or hate it or whatever. But they will be stimulated by it. Let me also say, because Cass's books are on.
Because you're running this conversation.
I know.
The microphone. Yeah.
I got the talking stick. But also, if you buy a copy of one of Cass's books tonight, it comes with a free copy, a signed copy, of course, of Two Steps Forward, our first book. Okay, over to you, Cass.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I let you keep talking then. That's fabulous. Thank you, Graeme.
Good save, Graeme.
Very good save. I was going to start by saying that, yes, I have interviewed you before in this very place. And so I knew ahead of time that I was going to have to wrangle you, which
Got me
will be
helping you.
obvious to anyone who's listening. But Anne, this is our first time talking. And I wanted to start by asking whether we should read anything into the fact that you felt it necessary to become a professor of women's mental health in order to continue living with Graeme.
There's a little bit of rivalry there. I mean, he would swear not, but look, picture this, I'm a doctor, then I become a doctor, because I get the research degree and become a professor. And then suddenly my IT specialist husband decides he has to go back to do a PhD. And he swears it had nothing to do with me. It was because my mother said, what's wrong with you? Why don't you have doctor in front of your name?
Good answer. I still think we're going to have to wrangle Graeme. Just keep the mic in your hands, Anne, until I give you permission to give it back to you. All right, look, let's start talk about the book. So Two Steps Forward, which was the original book, was set on a pilgrim's walk, for those of you who haven't read it. The famous Camino de Santiago in Spain, where the main characters Martin and Zoe met. And this book, Two Steps Onward, continues several years later with another walk, this time from rural France on to Rome. So I thought I'd start by asking each of you to introduce briefly the 6 main characters, and I thought I might ask Anne you to introduce the male characters and Graeme you to introduce the female characters. Just a little bit about where they are at the beginning of the novel in their lives.
Okay, so Martin is still struggling with his daughter. He's a British engineer who has kind of changed his career, he thought, but it's not as kind of eye-opening and different as he'd hoped. His daughter is a 20-year-old medical student and she's still struggling. And it didn't quite work out with Zoe the way he had hoped, Zoe being the female character. So that's male character number 1. And it's told from his perspective, half of the book and half is told from Zoe. But we have 2 other male characters. So Gilles is a Frenchman, and we've spent a lot of time in France. And we know a lot of Frenchmen, and he's a little stereotypical, but we certainly know people just like this man. And he's a wine merchant. And in fact, we knew a wine merchant in Cluny that, contributed to the character. And he's going for his wife. He's not a walker. He's never done a day of exercise in his life. He's about wine and good food, as all Frenchmen are, really. But he is very devoted to his wife and he's walking for her. But he's kind of the background of the what wine do we have in this area and what food are we going to eat as he goes over the Alps and into Italy. And then the last one we do meet more in the first book is Bernard, the German young man, who unfortunately our German publishers don't like very much. He's a tad stereotypical too, but he's so typical of the Germans we met on this walk.
That's why it's called stereotypical.
Yeah, absolutely. And the long walks bring out character traits, particularly when you're doing it with lots of other countries. And somehow you do sort of fit in, and the Australians somehow become louder and drink more beer. Hence why there's not many Australians in our book.
Okay, great. So that's the
Yeah,
three
so
male
that's the three
characters. And Graeme, tell us about the three female characters.
Yeah, and look, I should add that Anne and I, Anne wrote Zoe
Right. I
in
was
the
going to
first
ask about
instance,
this.
and I wrote Martin in the first instance. But when it came to those other characters, Anne owned one of the other female characters, but also one of the male characters.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, so Anne's described Bernard, the German, and Bernard was Anne's pet, as it were. She loves Bernard, so she really does. And Sarah, Martin's daughter, was my character. So there was a real sort of sense of ownership of what that character, where that character was coming from, making them sympathetic on the page, inhabiting them a little bit. So.
And he knows more about French and Italian wine than me, so hence he had to have Gilles.
Oh, that makes sense. And I'm interested in how you pronounce that name, because I've been reading it and calling it, of course, Gilbert in my very Australian.
Sorry, it is Gilbert. It is Gilbert. Sorry.
Gilbert.
It was inspired by a Gilles person that we know. Sorry, it is Gilbert.
Sorry, if you're watching on Zoom from France or somewhere.
Yeah, there was a real Gilles.
You so shouldn't have had that second glass of wine.
Gilbert.
I was thinking Gilles is a very unusual pronunciation for Gilbert.
Yeah, we actually
Gilbert.
actually
Okay.
Gilles on the best of our sharp.
Sorry,
But, yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Okay, go on.
So no, it's your show. It's fine. So we've already mentioned Sarah, Martin's daughter. Let's start with her though. But she is a troubled troubled woman in her early 20s, and Martin feels that he has to stay in the UK and look after her. So when Zoe says, "Let's do this walk, let's have another shot at our relationship," he says, "No, I've actually got to stay behind and look after Sarah." But Martin and Sarah, Sarah eventually decides to join them on the pilgrimage. So we've got Sarah. They've all got a distance to go, emotionally in life as well as physically on this journey. And Sarah is someone who clearly has an awkward relationship with her father, her divorced father. Then you've got Zoe, of course, who is the narrator of half of the book, who Anne writes. Zoe is, we met her in Two Steps Forward as a somewhat flaky Californian. Stereotypes just keep rolling in, but somewhat flaky Californian. And she has actually toughened up quite a lot, become a lot more pragmatic. And as a result, she decided not to follow her heart, but to follow her head. And look, I think for a lot of women in particular, sometimes it takes them a very long time in life to find financial independence. And when they find that financial independence, they do not let go of it lightly. And she's hung on to that. She's finally got the career she wanted in the arts, which can take a long time to get to. She's making a living, and she's put that ahead of getting together with Martin. 3 years have passed, and she's starting to wonder if she made the right call. And when her friend Camille, who we'll get in touch with, who her lifelong soulmate, who she sees about once every 25 years and can't stand when she does, gets in touch and says, "I'm going to walk to Rome to see the Pope." For what? For forgiveness, for the hope of a cure, because she has multiple sclerosis. And she's decided she's going to travel, walk is a moot point, she's going to travel to Rome, and she wants Zoe to accompany her on this pilgrimage. And Camille becomes a very interesting character in the book, I'd like to think. And part of it is because, from Zoe's point of view, they have this soulmate, this tremendous bond. And so she's going to go and she's going to help her soulmate walk to Rome. And it just so happens that in doing so, she might hook up with Martin again. And in the nature of fiction, she is going to have to live that and make a decision as to whether it's going to be Martin or Camille who ends up.
Which is one of the great moral dilemmas of the book, I think. So tell us a little bit about the walk that they do, because I know that you guys did the walk yourselves before the world shut down and became a different place. I think you got back just in time. So you just tell us, don't give too much away, but just tell us a little bit about that area of the world and the sort of walking that they do in the story.
Well, up until 2 years ago, we spent quite a lot of time in France, and this village Cluny, which is definitely worth a visit if you ever get to go to France again, is fabulous. It's a fabulous place, and there's 2 walks that go through there, and they are signified by signs on the lampposts. And I carry them around with me. I have the scallop shell, which is the sign of the Camino de Santiago, and if you follow that scallop shell through the lampposts, and when you don't have a lamppost, it's on a fence post, it's on a house, it's somewhere, it's on and it gets you all the way to Santiago, and that's the traditional Camino, of which there are many routes. And the other one is the dove. There was a dove in, which is this one, which is actually takes you over the Alps to Assisi. So we thought we needed to do that. And we started that, and life intervened, and we when you actually go over the Alps and you hit the Via Francigena, and that goes from Canterbury to Rome, and because our characters needed to get to Rome as soon as possible because Camille has multiple sclerosis and she may not make it, they leave the Assisi walk and go straight south. So it's 2 different walks combined. And we got back from Rome March the 4th last year. So we just did it. Yeah,
Very good timing, very good timing. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about Camille and her illness, because I think a big part of the novel is the issue of female friendship and loyalty, and what you'd be prepared to sacrifice for a friend, and whether, as Graeme said, whether you would choose a friend over a lover. So could you tell us, either of you, a little bit about that, and how important is Camille's life-threatening illness to the sort of motivation for the rest of the group to finish this journey?
I mean, it's absolutely essential, because it's what is the inciting incident for really all of them. And we didn't know that this is what the book was going to be about. We knew we were going to write a book on this walk when we did it. So as opposed to the first one, we knew this was going to be a sequel. We had no idea what it was going to be about. And it was great to kind of really flesh it out. We know someone, Graeme may mention later, who has this version of multiple sclerosis. It's an unusual version which hits you cognitively first rather than physically. And it just kind of started to all fit together. And the friendship thing became a really important thing, because, I mean, I even reflected, I mean, we've been married 30 plus years, and I have 2 girlfriends I've known since I was age 8 who are so important to my life. And I didn't meet him till I was 23. So, you know.
What she's saying is you're marginally less important. That's what
Well,
she's saying.
we
In
have
the
children
nicest possible
together.
way.
We have 30 years together. But in this book, she's not in a relationship yet with Martin. It's a later life relationship. So I think it's a much different, you know, I think if you're in a 30-year relationship, kids, that's different. But, you know, this is a starting out relationship. And she hasn't understood her commitment to Camille, and that's part of what the book is as to why that friendship, the basis of that friendship.
When we started Two Steps Forward, the first book, and we would say, read that first if you can. You don't have to, but why wouldn't you? When we started that, we envisaged it as a romantic comedy. Because of the Rosie Project, I knew all the tropes, how you wrote a romantic comedy. But one of the rules of romantic comedy, supposedly the only immutable rule of romantic comedy, it's not happy ending, it's not, you know, it's that romantic love must be the highest value. There can be nothing more important than romantic love. And those of us looking around this room, some of us are a little older, and you get to a stage in your life where, in Martin's case, his daughter and his parental responsibilities are more important. Zoe makes a tough decision that her career, her independence and so forth, are more important. So Two Steps Forward ended up with a romantic comedy subplot rather than being a romantic comedy up front. And the thing that Anne alluded to about the multiple sclerosis is that we have a good friend who has it pretty severely. So she has dementia as a result of multiple sclerosis, and that's preceded the physical problems. And she is in fact the wife of the guy who did the most to inspire the Don Kilman character in the Rosie Project. And in fact, the Rosie Project started off as being a story very much about that situation that he faced, and became something totally different later on.
I think there are a few, probably a few similarities between Martin and Don Tillman, would you say?
A little, just
a few.
just not as
Just a
extreme.
few, maybe not as extreme. So getting back to Gilbert, Camille's ex-husband, who nevertheless accompanies them on this journey, despite the fact that they're separated. The way that that's written does feel very believable, that they've sort of accommodated that, that decision. How did you decide that between the two of you, and were there any sort of conflicts about something that seems quite strange? I mean, the fact that they're separated, but they're going to go on this huge walk together.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, even the situation I talked about our two friends, they were separated at one point when she had, before she was diagnosed with MS, she was behaving somewhat strangely, but because the male party there, it was a little like Don Tillman, the people the therapists who were involved saw him as a problem. So they separated, they felt they weren't really compatible, as he would put it. And then once she had a diagnosis, he said, well, everything's back on the table. We're back together. So in his very scientific way, if you like, he said, misdiagnosis, obviously everything needs to be rolled back, redone. Actually made a little movie about it. And we sort of took that on board. But it gave us a chance to explore love at different stages of your life. And here's Camille, who has a life-threatening illness, terminal illness ultimately. And here she's got this guy who is utterly devoted to her, but who she doesn't love. So, and everybody around her saying, hey, what a great deal, what a great deal. But nobody's going to be saying this to Sarah, who's 20, to accept someone you don't truly love. And it just, it's an opportunity to, I think, reflect on love at different stages of life, the compromises we make, romantic love versus the practicalities.
That was my next question, actually, was about compromises, because I think the book is a lot about compromises. The characters obviously sort of compromise in all sorts of very practical ways as the book goes on, about where they're going to eat and accommodation and how far they walk each day, what they're going to drink. But there's a lot of much larger compromises going on day to day to do with the time and energy that each character spends with each other character, and the things in their lives that they're willing to give up for each other. And I wanted to ask, well, you sort of answered the question about that you wrote Zoe and Graeme, you wrote Martin, but I wanted to ask how that compromise worked, and whether there were times when you felt each of your own characters was wanting to go in one direction, but you had some pushback from the other co-author about whether that should happen or not.
Look, we've always planned our books together, even my thrillers and the Rosie series, and Adam Sharp as well. And that's kind of been part of the really fun part of working together, the planning. And for this one in particular, we really set out with really knowing Zoe and Martin and not much beyond. And really excited about what we could do with this. And we were doing it as we were walking. And walking is one of the themes of this book, just as much as the first one. Long distance walking, whether you call it a pilgrimage or not, is unique. We do lots of shorter walks, i.e., we're doing the Central Rim 4 days in Queensland, COVID permitting, in October, and the overland, and we've gone the coast to coast for 3 weeks. But when you're doing it for 87 days or 77 days, which I think this one was, it gives you so much time to reflect and work out what's important. And to me, that underpins everything about compromise. Is if you know what's important, you know what you're working with.
Especially if you're walking with people who don't have the same idea of what's important as you do.
Yeah, but it really realigns you. It's in quite an amazing way. I mean, I just love long distance walking for that reason. And we're obviously pretty good at that. And we didn't always agree, but we sorted it out.
Yeah, look, I'm conscious there's a lot of writers in this room. You know, so if there were 10 writers on an island, we'd all make a living writing for each other. But sort of technically speaking, we argued those sort of plot questions and character questions. We argued those as plot and character questions in the planning stage, or we pulled ourselves away from the text and had those arguments rather than trying to argue them in writing. So we separate the drafting from the planning, and that really made it a lot easier, because you weren't saying these are terrible words. You were saying, no, we've got an issue with the plot. I'll just say one
Oh,
thing.
you might be able to say what I'm about to say.
Have a go.
But once we started writing, things changed. There was some change. Yeah,
Yeah, and always, once you actually start writing, of course, you know, the words go down, things change. It's interesting, in both the first and the second books, Zoe has more words than Martin does. So there are more words that originally came off Anne's, you know, keyboard than mine. Not by a huge amount, but just a few
That
more.
surprises me.
No? Come on, this is what's known as, in writing, this is known as a running joke. But there's, in each book, there was one Zoe chapter that I ended up writing, just saying, I want to write this chapter, because there's this plot thing that we argued about or talked about, and I just didn't feel that we really understood what it was. So I wrote this chapter, and then Anne went back and fixed it.
yeah.
Anne went back and fixed it.
Right, same one both times. God, I just realised. Yeah, in the first book, it was when Renata does the talking to Zoe, and she goes, "Doom." And the second one, it's the well, yeah, but no, it's really about when they walk into Ulla. It's the third act turning point. It might have been the actual Martin chapter around that, but when you become so close to your character, you start inhabiting them, and you can't see the wood for the trees because they can't, and you actually rely on the other person to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this story this morning actually, and I thought that the pilgrim walks that you describe in both books, with people sort of travelling separately and alone, but then connecting with each other along the way, seems like a perfect metaphor for life in general, really, where we sort of each have got our own journey and we occasionally intersect with others along the way. And I guess it's a bit like that with writing as well.
Look, I think in this book, one thing that made it different from Two Steps Forward was the physical location. The Two Steps Forward is set on a very well-travelled Camino. So you're going to meet other pilgrims along the way, that the stories kept coming from outside. Whereas our experience, one of the eye-openers for us walking on this Chemin and then the Via Francigena, was we met a total of 5 pilgrims over 77 days, 2 couples and one single, and we met them only fleetingly. So we realised we needed the story to walk itself. We needed to have enough people and enough interactions that all these things would happen. And we set each one of these 6 people up with a journey. I mean, Zoe's and Martin's and Camille's journeys are pretty big and important. Gilbert's a little less so, and the 2 younger people's probably less so again. But those 3 at the top, Camille became a really big character. Their individual journeys and their motivations, you see right at the beginning of the book, they all have something they need to learn, and they're going to learn it from each other, and that's the idea of the writing.
So the relationship between Martin and his daughter Sarah, Martin and Sarah, and the relationship between Sarah and Zoe, which is fairly conflicted at the beginning, I'd have to say. Did you draw from real life of raising young adults to sort of flesh out that character?
I've been lucky enough not to have stepchildren, but you know, we certainly have had teenage daughters, or a teenage daughter and a teenage son. So there was definitely that. There's a whole thing of Graeme doing our daughter's driver's license where they kept it from me. Those 120 hours was a secret. I mean, did all of this because, you know, she and I went, you know, it was that teenage girl thing. So I could definitely, I could definitely get into that, where he was much closer to Dominic then than but she's now 30, so, or 29, so moved on since then. But I also, I treat a lot of women with admittedly mostly perinatal issues, but a lot of them have stepchildren. Admittedly, they're usually 7 or 8 rather than teenagers, but just those issues that you have with stepchildren and blended families, I kind of feel like I'm familiar with enough from friends and patients that I worked with that it was pretty easy to tap into.
And it's really interesting in the story that the issues that come up and, that sort of fine line between Martin wanting to protect Sarah and make sure that she has a good life and her wanting to be independent and make her own decisions. And so I think it's
and Zoe came from
very well.
A very different background where she let her kids go really early. She was let go early and she let hers go early. And Martin's holding on and I've quite a few dads like that.
So the book, as with the first book, is wonderfully light-hearted and full of wit. And I wanted to ask you how difficult it is, do you find, to write humour, and is that more difficult than writing sorrow or trauma?
Look, my own writing, I don't think I write anything without an eye to the comedic, to the absurd, and so on. So I find that there are books books that are unleavened by, I find very hard going. For me, that part of it comes naturally. Anne writes crime, and she does write some humour, but it's much more set piece type of humour, whereas I'm just trying to keep a little bit of cynicism and observation going all the way. So that probably tends to come off my keyboard rather than Anne's, but the deeper understanding of human dynamics, I think, comes from Anne.
And which one do you think is more difficult? I guess maybe for
look, I think
different answers for different.
Laugh out loud funny is almost impossible. And I'm obviously biased, but I can't think of any other book I've laughed as much at as The Rosie Project. I mean, it was just...
It is very funny.
Very funny. I've never set out to write anything like that. But in my crime books, the problem with crime, I don't tend to have lots of blood on my pages. It's not that sort of crime. She's a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, but it's still, certainly in the day as Curses, dealing with infanticide. So you think, oh, do you really want to? And I don't want people kind of being bogged down in that. You need some light to pick it up. So there are some moments where Natalie, my heroine's bipolar disorder, gets her into a bit of hot water, and it's about that which I think is really important, the ups and downs of reading. You don't want to be set down the bottom. You don't want to be all the time. I mean, Kathy Lett is just always up here, and I find that exhausting. So you've got, I think, Shades is good.
Shades. And
sorry, just to add, I think that it's not so much how hard it is to write the serious stuff or how hard it is to write the comedic stuff. The biggest challenge we have is keeping it even and making it feel like you're not reading Anne's voice or my voice, but reading Zoe's and Martin's. And we are so used to reading books that are written by a single author. It's so unusual to have multiple authors who actually contribute to the text in a novel, that the risk is that Anne's style and my style clash and draw attention to themselves. So my issue really is that Anne doesn't go for that sort of light, smart stuff so much as I do. And I will go over a Zoe chapter and make her a bit smart-mouthed to just balance that. So you sort of feel, that's what I'm doing, Anne's doing stuff to my prose as well. So you feel that you're reading the same author.
Yeah, good teamwork, guys. So both books conclude somewhat more ambiguously than most novels in this genre, I would say. The reader certainly feels satisfied, but there are still some big questions at the end of the book that are unanswered, making us wonder what will happen next. And I wondered whether that was just a sneaky way for you to leave room for another book, or do you each enjoy actually reading and writing books that allow that space for the reader to imagine what happens after the end of the last page?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, we certainly left it open at the end of Two Steps Forward because we thought there would be another. We're not so sure there will be another after this, though. We were booked twice on the Shikoku 88 Buddhist temple walk.
I used to live in Shikoku.
Oh, wow. I talked to you later about that. And obviously it's been cancelled twice. And we really thought Zoe would enjoy the 88 Buddhist temples going around the island of Shikoku. So it's not absolutely impossible, but we feel we've tied the end up pretty much at the end of this one. But I like really exploring some degree of getting the reader to think. And in The Long Shadow, which is my last book that came out in the middle of COVID last year, which never got to really have anything happen because we were in lockdown for so long, I really put an ethical question and I left a big question. And I kind of, it's not so much that you don't know what happened, but should she have done what she did? And I wouldn't have done it, but my character did it. And I think she's justified, maybe. But yeah, I think getting the reader to think is good.
We're going to maybe have a little reading in a minute, but before we do, and some questions from the audience, but before we do that, I know that authors on a new book tour can get very bored with answering all the same questions all the time from interviewers. So I thought that I might try and uncover a few secret details about Anne and Graeme with a bit of a pop quiz. Now this requires short, sharp answers, Graeme. And Anne, but particularly Graeme. Now this is just a bit of fun about your lives together. Now feel free to pass on anything that you think's inappropriate. Who does the cooking at home?
Mostly him.
Who's the best driver?
Anne.
You've been very fair so far. Who's the best negotiator and who's the best compromiser? Both?
Yeah, it'll be me.
Both. Wow.
No, I think
No, it's me.
he's better.
Okay. At both, negotiating and compromising.
I think I'm an equally good compromiser, but you're a better negotiator.
I'm prepared to accept that.
And there's the proof. You have it. All right. Who has control of the TV remote?
I don't watch TV.
You couldn't find it
The answer
to
is Anne.
save his life.
I wouldn't know how to operate it.
Yeah, literally.
Interesting. Okay. Who usually decides holiday destinations?
Anne.
Oh, interesting. Do you have arguments about whether the toilet paper roll is left under or over?
No.
No? And is it
Not
under or
important.
over? Not important?
Yeah, I wouldn't even know which way.
I asked Trent Dalton this question once, not so long ago, and he completely misunderstood the question and started sort of going, and I said, no, Trent, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking about the roll.
Cass, you and I have a shared experience. I spent several days staring at the ceiling in intensive care at one stage, not knowing whether I was going to get out of there. And you know what? And after that, I've never cared about which way you hang the toilet roll.
Yay. All right, just a couple more. Who has made the most impulsive purchase and what was it?
It's going to be me.
Yeah, but I've got to think what it is. Definitely him, but I don't think what it was. Oh, my God. Okay, we've just had our second child. We have two. We've got a 2-year-old. We have a baby. We walk in to get a family car. We come out with a red 911 Porsche.
Okay, that wins. You win,
But I
Graeme.
love it. I love it. I still have it.
All right, who has made the most romantic gesture and what was it?
Definitely Graeme. He's the most romantic man I've ever met in my entire life. And where can I start? Oh, it would have to be my 40th or 50th. No, the 50th. 50th, it was a
I
surprise.
love that you have a choice.
I
even.
know.
One every 10 years, you know.
No, there's been a million. But the 50th birthday, quite aside from it was at the Taj Mahal in India, and I didn't even know I was going there. He then takes me back to our house in France, and it kind of pushed me ahead to go, and I opened the door, and there are 3 people sitting on my sofa in masks. No, not this sort of mask, in eye masks. And I just kind of discombobulated, and they could see me discombobulating. They had to speak. It was my 3 girlfriends, the 2 of whom I've known since I was age 8. He'd flown them over to France for my 50th. He's
Grand
just
gesture.
Oh, that's
a
a grand
good-
gesture. You guys are living the dream. Now we're all jealous. We all want to be you two. Okay, I'm going to finish with a couple. Are you both early birds or night owls?
You can answer that one.
Neither.
Middle of the day people. All right. And
Just
who
slack people. Sleeping.
Varies.
who reads more books?
Definitely me. Absolutely.
By a factor of about 10.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
totally.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just
Oh,
keep
that's
bookshops.
great. I
If
feel like I
everyone's
know
like
you
me,
feel a bit
there'd
better
be
now.
bookshops everywhere.
Selling junk.
Oh, they're good. A lot of them are
Good junk, though. Good junk.
Yeah.
All right, it's been great. Thank you for participating in that. Now, look, everybody would love to hear a reading. I'm pretty sure we've got time
We
for
do,
a
we do.
6-minute. Graham's assured me it's 6 minutes, and knowing Graham, it will be 6 minutes on the dot. And then we'll have time for some questions after that.
Okay, I think Hugh set a very high bar, unfortunately. We will do our best. Well, Anne will, and I'll, yeah.
I'm going to hand it over.
You just try and keep up.
Okay. Fate announced itself as the buzzing in my pocket of my jeans. The guy running the team building workshop for the refugee centre where I volunteered was checking off the cliches. Altruism without empathy is like a ship without a rudder. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Oh, that one I'd lived. But since when did helping people get so complicated? My mind was on the homework he'd set. Be prepared to discuss 3 events that have defined your life. I could only think of 2. The first was at college. I'd helped my roommate Camille get a termination. It had meant a road trip across the country from St. Louis to Los Angeles, estrangement from my religious mother, and the beginning of the kind of thinking that brought me to where I was and who I was. The second was the death of my husband Keith in a car accident. My search for answers and healing led me first to Camille's home in Cluny in eastern France, and then to a single step that turned into a 1,200-mile walk along the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, the ancient pilgrim's path from Camille's door to the west coast of Spain. I had come back stronger, strong enough to say that my career was more important than moving to England to live with Martin, the engineer I'd fallen for on the walk. But 3 years later, here I was in a hotel meeting room surrounded by negative energy, while outside the sun caught the white caps across San Francisco's harbour. I took out my phone, an email from some guy called Gilbert Morvan with a .fr address. Were scammers now posing as Frenchmen? Then I remembered he was Camille's ex-husband. I typed my pin and fate showed its face. Camille will make a pilgrimage to the on the Chemin de Assis to Rome to see the Pope. What the hell? Gilbert was Camille's ex. They'd split up just after I finished the Camino. And the Pope? Camille was Catholic, but when we were roommates in college, the most piousness I'd seen was a quick visit to the priest for a confession so she could sin some more. And the Chemin de Assis is a walking track. Camille had watched me pack for the walk, freaking out at the idea of living for 3 months without makeup. No way was she walking to Rome. I was right, but in the worst possible way. Camille had multiple sclerosis. She is unable to travel without assistance. We are reunited. We will depart Friday. I read the rest of Gilbert's email in the street. Most of it was practical stuff. I'd heard about people doing the pilgrims' trails in wheelchairs, following the cycling routes. I pictured Camille, stereotypically French in stiletto heels, being pushed by Gilbert along a dirty highway, trucks bearing down on her. A thought struck me. Maybe I could get hold of the cart that Martin had pulled from Cluny to Santiago. It had been redesigned as an all-terrain gurney for an army. Camille could travel on the walking tracks and avoid the traffic. I hadn't reached out to Martin for 3 years. He'd taken my decision to stay in San Francisco and follow my dreams of being an artist as a rejection, and I guess it was. Camille and I had only seen each other once in 28 years. That single day in her home in Cluny had been enough to send me escaping in the direction of Spain. We were different emotionally and spiritually, and at college, she'd driven me nuts until she came to me for help. Since then, despite sometimes going for a year without hearing from her, despite not being able to remember the names of her partners, there'd been something unbreakable between us, something I didn't have with anyone else. I didn't need meditation or divine guidance to tell me what I knew already. I had to be with Camille on this journey too.
Thank you.
And she would say Gilbert, because she doesn't have a French accent.
That's good. My response to Zoe's email hadn't required any great weighing of options. I was already committed to Sarah, who was coming down from Edinburgh to spend the second half of her university holidays with me in Sheffield. It represented something of a breakthrough for us. Then a long bit of waffle that I can leave out. The next morning, there was a text from Sarah. Thinking about not coming down. Guessing that will be okay with you. Neither of us liked phone calls, but sometimes it was the only way. What's changed? Nothing. Just don't want to be stuck in a flat in Sheffield. You could have stayed with your mother. I would have, but she's gone away and won't let me stop there, which is a bit ridiculous considering I've been living away from home for 2 years. Regardless, we made an agreement. I've been looking forward to having time with you. What are we going to do? All day in Sheffield. It's not exactly Paris. I was supposed to be the rock in a stormy ocean. Reliable. Consistent. There. Trouble was, Sarah's emotional instability was paired with a keen intellect, which she devoted largely to playing games. We'd been playing Rock and Ocean for 20 minutes when frustration got the better of me. Look, I knocked back a chance to go walking in France. With Zoe? Bloody hell. Why would I be walking with Zoe? So yes then. So no then. I said no to her. Okay? Not okay. I'm not going to be the one who wrecks your holiday with your girlfriend so you can sit in a flat all day doing nothing. I thought you had studies to do. Anyway, if you don't come, I still won't go to France. I'm not coming. So you'd be staying home for no reason. I imagined myself explaining to my therapist that if Sarah had definitely pulled out, I might as well go to France. I suspected he wouldn't find the logic as compelling as I did. Less than an hour later, Sarah texted again. Sorry for being rude. Things aren't great. How about I come to France with you? Everybody wins. Why would you want to come to France? Hello? France versus Sheffield? I sat on it all afternoon, and the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The Camino de Santiago had changed me, as it reputedly changes everyone. Perhaps a walk would be the circuit breaker Sarah needed. She and I would certainly have time together, and if Zoe was going to be back in my life, it wouldn't be such a bad thing that Sarah got to know her.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful from both of you. And I think that gives a really lovely sense of the voices of both Martin and Zoe and a little bit of their personalities too.
Yeah.
Do we have some questions?
We do. We've got one from the Zoom audience. I'll go first. I'll just project. So Sarah from Zoom has asked if you guys have working practices that are compatible, or are there any kind of, problems with the working practices?
Mostly not. We both like to plan at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening over a glass of wine, so that works really compatibly. Other than that, it does vary as to whether the kind of muses hit us, but we're very respectful of each other, so if we can see the other person's diving in and we want to do something else, we'll just do our other thing. And we both like to exercise, to break, like go for walks to, well, he thinks on them. I tend to just get a break, and that works quite well as long as we can time it.
Yeah, I think there's, we actually work in the same room. I was reading Nikki French, and the two of them work in separate parts of the house. And so I'm very sort of Coffee Tower stuff. Connie and John Cleese, but but we work in the same room, simply practically sometimes because that's where the fire's burning or whatever. And Anne uses me as sort of a human thesaurus / spell checker. You know, how do you spell this? Because, hey, come on, you've done it so badly that Microsoft Word can't work it out. Okay, and I tend to use Anne as my sounding board for how funny is this? And of course, if Anne is deep in, you know, a mother's grief for her lost baby or something like that, and I say, how funny is this? There's a little bit of teaching goes there. But broadly speaking, we work very, very closely. We don't, there's another couple we know who are friends, and not quite as visible as authors at the moment, but they're getting there, and they work very, very closely as well, but it seems pretty unusual.
Yeah. My partner and I write TV and film together, and there's certainly moments when I'm woken up, haven't had my coffee yet, and he starts talking about a scene, and I feel like, you know, this needs to wait until I've had caffeine, actually. So there are moments when it doesn't quite work, but yeah, I get you.
Graeme knows he has to get the coffee in the
Yeah,
morning
yeah,
before he
that's-
speaks to me.
Should be the rule. That should be the rule. Are there any questions from the audience here? Yeah, Bianca.
I can stand and kind of shout
Yeah.
if that works. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed your reading here. I love the book also. And yeah, I'm halfway through. I read Two Steps Forward in 2019 when I first moved to Brisbane. And it was just it made such an impression on me to want to one day be able to do the walk as well, the pilgrimage. And I'm halfway through the second book. So my question is, in coming to the first, to Two Steps Forward, were you journaling along the way? Were you taking notes? Did you know, how much of the story did you already know when you were on the walk? And what was your process for being on the walk, and sort of then how much of that made it into the final version? Thank you.
I think that Bianca's probably close enough that people could hear the question. Yeah.
Okay, so this really goes back to Two Steps Forward. And the Camino, we had long service leave, and we thought we were in danger of just sitting and eating in France, which has going for it. But we thought, yeah, what better way to do a holiday than walk? And we were just going to walk from Cluny, because we'd seen the scallop shell, from Cluny to Le Puy, which is about 2 weeks, which is about the longest we'd ever walked before. So we had absolutely no idea about a book, and absolutely no idea about that we were even going to go further than that. But everywhere we got to Le Puy, we looked at each other and went, this is kind of fun, let's keep going. I kept some notes, and we had an enormous amount of video. He videoed me everywhere on the first one, so that helped a lot. But we got to the end, and we really did do the Camino. First Camino was life-changing, and I at least didn't know why I was doing it, and worked it out along the way, and had the epiphany and all of that you have on, a lot of people have on the first Camino. And then, because then we decided to do a walk, we did it again. It was 2,000 kilometres. No, we walked again. Yeah. Sorry. Once we'd decided to do a book, we did the walk again. Right,
The same walk.
The same walk, except that when we hit the French border at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is already 1,000 kilometres in or more, we finished it off rather than going around the coast, which is what Two Steps Forward does. We did the Camino Francis, which is the traditional 880 kilometres. And I'm really, really pleased we did that. It gives us a lot of opportunity to compare the two. And if you're ever doing one, unless you really want solitude, you do the Camino Francis. It was an amazing experience. I didn't need the solitude the second time. And we met some amazing people with amazing stories, and a lot of those in varying forms made it into the book in not so much our characters. I mean, Zoe's grief in the first one, I tapped into, grief I could tap into, but there were so many people that walk the Camino because they are recently widowed, including, I think we mentioned him, we met a New Zealander, we changed it, but we met a New Zealander who was in his 70s in a kilt. It's pretty memorable, I've got to tell you. And he was doing the French section, not just the Camino, not just the traditional one. And we said, why are you walking? And he said, well, my wife of 50 years got diagnosed with cancer a year ago, and she spent her last year coming up with a list for me to do once she died. And she died, and this was the first thing on his list he was doing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that's very committed method acting, I have to say, and method writing.
Well, and just to clarify for Bianca, that we didn't have any plans to write the book when we worked the Camino the first time. So we went back the second time so we would have the information we needed, the detail for the book.
And
We planned it in between.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate the detail writing questions.
Great. I think we don't have much time left, but if there's another burning question, we can take one more question.
How many pairs of shoes or boots would you go through?
How many pairs of shoes or boots would you go through as a question?
Just one. And no, if you get your boots right, no, and boots, they were like, they look like runners. Really, I wear really lightweight, no blisters, nothing. Yeah, really great boot.
I walked 2,100 kilometres in a pair of Adidas, not runners, but they're hiking shoes, but low hiking shoes. And at the end of it, I put them in the bin, but it was because it was symbolic to do that. The pilgrims of ancient times used to burn the clothes at the end of the walk, and I dumped the boots, but I felt bad doing it because they were still pretty good.
You should have framed them. That would have been a piece of art.
It was symbolic.
Look, thanks everybody for your questions, and thank you Zoom people for your questions too. This book is a book full of hope, heart, wisdom, love and second chances, I think. It's a perfect antidote to these COVID times that we're all just re-entering again. And it does take the reader on a journey across the world on a famous pilgrim's walk, which it may be some time before we can actually do ourselves in person. So one of the great benefits or attractions of both your books, I think, is that it really, they're escapists. They take you away to another place that at the moment we're certainly not able to do ourselves. Thank you so much, Graeme and Anne, for speaking with us tonight. It's been absolutely delightful. Everybody, please join me in thanking Graeme and Anne.
Thank you very much, Cass. And let me just reiterate what I said at the beginning, that if you want a copy of the first book, Two Steps Forward, the best way to do it is buy a copy of one of Cass's books, and it comes free. And don't forget to buy Hugh's book, The Beautiful Fall,
Oh my goodness.
for that super smart person that you know.
For the lockdown you might be about to go into.
Yeah, and
Yes,
look,
at any
honestly,
time.
I hope not, I hope not.
I know a few Zoom people came on late, but if you weren't here for that beginning, the reading at the beginning, my goodness, I haven't read Hugh's book yet, and I
You've got to
will
read it,
definitely
Chrissy.
be.
Get onto
So
that.
many people have been telling me to read it, and it is absolutely the book for me. So it might be the book for you as well. Everyone, we're going to reconfigure into the warm inside, and we will join Anne and Graeme for a signing. So thank you very much.
Thanks everybody. Bye Zoom people.